All right. All right. All right. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why YouTube won't let me go live on this other event. So sorry about the confusion. I have no idea why it's not working. The other event is lined up and everything, but it's literally telling me that I can't go live on that other event. So I don't know what's going on. All right. So here we are. Hopefully other people will find this link. I'm thinking I might send a Patreon. I might put this out on Patreon just to make sure I'm not confusing anybody here. All right, let me just post something quickly on Patreon. So as you so as some of you might know, or some of you might not know, I am not at my house. You might notice that I'm not at my house. You can probably see that I'm not at my house. I am in South Carolina. All right, let me just finish this. All right. So I think this is actually going to end up being public now because I don't know how to do it any other way. All right. Okay. Yes. So, all right. So this probably should be good enough. All right. So yes, it is a new venue. As you can see, I am in a strange bedroom with a extremely large bed. I'm actually at some friend's house. I'm in South Carolina. I'm here for about a month and a half to carve a large marble monument. And so this is the first time that I'm actually going to try to do everything, do the, do the Patreon Q&A, and maybe actually have to put up a video while I'm not at my house. So I'm still figuring out the technology of all this, but here we are. So at least we've got some live thing going on. And as you can see, I'm not very well shaved. We got stuck in Greenville for a week because we were supposed to come to Charleston, and with the hurricane warning and everything, we kind of just stayed in Greenville and waited out for the hurricane to stop. So now I'm trying to catch up with everything here, which means that I'm not shaving, and hopefully I'll shave for my for my next official video. All right, so let's go on to the Q&A. I want to make sure whoever few people are in the room right now, you can hear me. I hope. If you can't hear me, you have to tell me that you can't hear me. If you can hear me, you should tell me that you can hear me, so that I'm sure that everything's okay. All right. All right. I've got 2 yeses for hearing. All right, let's go. All right, let's do this. So I'm looking at my laptop, and the camera is over here. So I might be doing some of this stuff while we're doing the Q&A. All right. All right, questions for September Q&A. So as usual, I'm going to start with the Patreon questions, and as we go, if you guys have some questions in the chat, go ahead and ask them. But I get the feeling that a lot of the people in the chat have already probably posed their questions in the question boxes. All right. All right, so here we go. So let me think if there's some news that I want you guys to know before I start with these questions. I'm going to be in Toronto next week. I put it up on Facebook today, but I'm getting really late at putting these things up. I'm going to be in Toronto next week for 2 events on Friday and Saturday. So if you're in Toronto, check out my Twitter feed or my Facebook page. You'll find the details of that. My website should be out like next week. I'm really hoping everything is up. There's just a few things like because we're actually putting up all the previous posts from all the videos that I've done since the beginning. And so once you get to the website, you'll be able to see all the previous posts. So there are a few technical details we still have to figure out. And so, all right, okay. So this question is related to what I'm saying now. So can you tell us what the monument is going to be of? It's actually a gravestone. It's going to be in an Orthodox, at an Orthodox seminary and monastery called St. Tikhon's up in Pennsylvania. And it's a pretty large gravestone in marble. It's probably one of the biggest things that I've done. It's like 6 inches thick with, and there's going to be a cross with a sign of an image of the resurrection on it. And then on each side of the cross, there are going to be 2 saints, because the person who is ordering this is a physician. And so Saint Panteleimon and Saint Luke of, I don't remember, it's a recent Russian saint who was also a doctor. So it's going to be pretty big. I haven't seen the stone yet. We're having a few little problems with the delivery of the stone, but hopefully that'll be fixed in the next few days. All right, here we go. So first question, Riss Oliver. In my search and hopefulness about finding other people who understand absolutely any symbolism, be they Christians explicitly or musicians, I'm always listening and hoping that the language is of the higher nature. I hear things that can have symbolic significance, such as height, light, darkness, the masculine and feminine. Love songs are a major one. In music, I have come to give the benefit of the doubt regardless, and assume that the person I'm listening to has something to say I might learn from. One of the 12 rules. Am I being foolish? It feels profound sometimes in music with this axiom put on the front of songs. I agree. I mean, I've made a video about music before. I've said that I don't totally understand music, but the reason why I think it's a big deal that I don't understand music shows that I think that it's important. It would be important to understand music. And I have an intuition that there's a lot going on in music in terms of patterns, pure patterns and rhythm, cycles and variations on patterns, let's say. So this whole idea of a pattern and how it can play itself out in different variations of itself is very powerful. And I've also, there's something else going on, especially in pop music. There is a sense that there are certain types of people who are, you could say, prophetic. You could say that they're mediums, or that they somehow are tuning in to what's going on. And so musicians seem to manifest what's going on in the world. And so sometimes you can be really surprised to encounter very profound symbolism even in pop songs and in contemporary, even popular music. So, I mean, I remember even Mathieu and I remember Mathieu when we were younger in our 20s, he had compiled a whole CD of it was like kind of songs for the end of the world. I think it was called, this CD or something. And in it, he had all these songs that seemed to bring up, all the symbolism of this if you've read Matthew's book, you know, this idea of time, which is kind of coming up, and you know, the moment of the Sabbath, and this idea of time coming up and kind of devouring space, or you know, this kind of moment of the end of the cycle where things get loopy and crazy. And so I remember he had a song from the Red Hot Chili Peppers on there, and he had that song Blackbird by the Beatles, which by the way you should listen to, because it's a very very powerful song in terms of symbolism. And Let It Be is a great song by the Beatles that really seems to kind of tune in to the issue of what's going on today, and the feminine, and how the feminine can open up the space in a different manner, you know, when things seems to not be working anymore. So I would say, yeah, I would agree with Rhys Oliver that it's worth looking for. All right. So I have, okay, there it is. I thought I'd lost your chat there. All right. Okay. So next question. How do you determine when an angel is specifically visiting you? And how do you know when the angel is one that you can handle hosting? That's a tough question to answer, because one of the aspects of hosting, let's say, the angel, is that in a certain manner there's always an element in which, at least at the beginning, you're not sure that that's what's happening. And so there is this notion that the first gesture we should put out is a hospitable one, in terms of strangers, in terms of you know, people who come along our way, who kind of surprise us in our daily routine. And that gesture of hospitality is the first one you need to put out there. And then it's in that relation that you will be sometimes surprised to find that person is bringing something to you which you didn't expect, something which is going to push you further, which is going to open up new venues for you, which is who are going to create new spaces for you. So I think that hospitality, as a rule, is probably the best way to go about it. And you know, Christ always says to be wise. I forget how it goes in English, but to be innocent as a dove and wise as a fox. So I think that you always have to have those two opposites kind of in your hands, so that you can open up that hospitality, but always have at least at some point be willing to be able to apply some critical judgment, not also to get suckered into something. I had you know, when I was living in Congo, we would always have people who would come up to us and have crazy stories about, you know, something that's happening to them, like some crazy story, how they need your help and everything. And I always would try to give the person the benefit of the doubt, and kind of move in the direction of helping them, but always be engaging them with them, asking questions and talking to them, and constantly asking questions, and being attentive, so that, and then sometimes that led me on a road, you know, of surprise and discovery, and also finding out that you actually can help someone, or that they have something really valuable to kind of bring to you, whether it be an opportunity or just kind of this moral guidance. And then other times I realized in the stories that there was something fishy, and things started to look a bit darker. And then at that point, you have to be able to shut the door and not let the darker aspects in. All right. All right, you have convinced me that it is an error to say that Santa Claus does not exist. Santa Claus exists, but does Santa have any potentialities of perception, intellect, or agency apart from his mystical body? That is, apart from the extended body composed of human beings acting on his personality. If no, does the angel of a city have such potentialities apart from its mystical body? If no, to that, does Christ have any such potentialities apart from his mystical body? All right. So I think we need to not stick on the Santa image too much. I agree. I think that Santa does. I think I could say that Santa Claus does have potentialities of perception. But I would let's use something which is maybe more easy to understand. Besides Santa, the idea of the city, for example, or the angel of a city, and the question of whether or not a city has capacities to perceive. Now you have to think of it in terms of when you think of a person, and you have to understand that a person is also composed of multiplicities. That's something that people always seem to be forgetting very quickly, that a person is composed of multiple aspects, and it's in that multiplicity that perception happens. And then that perception is communicated through systems of communication up to, let's say, our head, or up to the center of our consciousness. And that's where we then interpret that perception. So, for example, a city has let's say policemen, has employees of the city who work and fix things, have all kinds of employees and agents, but not also agents, but also citizens. So the citizens will perceive things in the city. They'll see that, there's a swing in the park on this road that's broken. And then they will communicate that to a city employee, who will communicate that to the head of the department, which is in charge of that. And then that head of the department will check with their boss if they have the budget to make that change. And then the communication will then go back down after the perception happens. There'll be a decision at some level in the hierarchy of the city's consciousness, you would say. There'll be a decision made, and then that decision will then flow down, and they will or will not fix the swing. And if they fix the swing, then that will reach all the way down to the citizens, and then the citizens will be happy that they fix the swing. If they don't fix the swing, then maybe the citizens will be unhappy. So now, you can link that to, for example, a human body. You stub your toe and it hurts, and your toe is telling you that you got to do something about this because this hurts. Now, you can decide that you are not going to do anything about it. You can totally decide that, and you can just leave it alone. And then maybe the next day you wake up and your toenail's broken and it's infected, and you're swollen and it's painful, and you can keep ignoring that for a while. You totally can do that, but as you do that, the part of you that was communicating to you that problem is going to not be happy, and is going to tell you that it's not happy. Just in the same way that if you never fix the swing in that neighborhood, then the people of that neighborhood are going to complain, are going to be annoyed, and might actually, do things against you. Might actually let's say organize to take you down, or organize things that will challenge the authority of the center of consciousness of that city. Now, a person is the same. If you let it go for a little while, there'll be at some point, well, you will not be able to do anything else. Your toe is going to be broken and huge and swollen, and your entire leg is going to get gangrene or whatever. Like, if you just let it go, at some point, your entire being is threatened by the fact that you ignored the sense that that came out of your big toe. And so I think that seeing it with the city is probably easier than seeing it with Santa, though I think you could probably do similar analysis with Santa, because if you look at how Santa Claus has changed based on how the story of Santa Claus has been received, and how Santa Claus has connected with different aspects of culture, becoming now, let's say, more and more limited to commercialism and to buying things. And so there's a manner in which the core of Santa Claus is receiving information from the outside, and is actually changing based on the information that it receives from the outside. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. And so it can help you understand. I think I really want people to be careful about when I talk about these ideas, these ontological categories and these ontological hierarchies. A lot of people have thought that I'm saying that God is like Santa. And seriously, first of all, anybody who's listened to more than a few videos of mine will know that that is not what I'm saying. God, the notion of God, I keep telling God is beyond all word, all name, all concept. And so it's only by very shaky analogy that we can understand at least that there are modes of consciousness and modes of being which are beyond just the individual. And so in that manner, we then, by analogy, can start to move up and understand how that moves up into, the infinite itself. But I'm not saying that Santa is like God. So I hope that is helpful. All right, here we go. So Bradley, let's see. I'm gonna have to be a little more careful with these questions because I realize that I answer a lot of questions that I probably shouldn't be answering. So, all right. All right. So Bradley Ward asked me a question about psychedelics, and I'm not going to answer that question because I've never taken psychedelics. And so I do not. I really cannot speak directly to that. I can only say that when there are certain moments when, for example, people had described psychedelic visions to me, and I was impressed that I could see how coherent they were and how close they were to kind of symbolic structures. But the same thing also, sometimes people will tell you dreams, and you're surprised to see how close the dreams are to these symbolic structures. Now, I want to give people a warning, is that in Orthodoxy, the notion of having a vision is definitely not the purpose of the spiritual life. And the church fathers, for example, the hesychastic fathers, the mystical fathers of the Orthodox Church, actually warn people about visions. They say that visions will happen as you enter the spiritual space, as as you, even the ascetics, as they fast, as they pray, as they come closer to God. It is possible that they might have visions, but they warn people against the visions because the visions can trick you in believing that this is what spiritual life is, and that's not what spiritual life is. Spiritual life is not having vision. Spiritual life is being transformed, becoming something else, becoming more, acquiring the virtues, being free from your passions, and ultimately being transformed and being totally free, in the image of God. And in Orthodox mysticism, they believe that we actually participate in God, to the extent that that's possible. And so that is the purpose of the spiritual life. Now, so having said that, like I said, I don't know enough about psychedelics to answer questions about that. All right, here we go. All right, in your recent video with David Flores, who is here in the chat, I saw. In your recent video with Paul Vanderklay, you talked about union with God. Could you expound upon this more? Maybe explain the terms for this process and go more in depth by what you mean by God's essence and the parts that one would share if one were to achieve such a unity. Now, in the Orthodox tradition, we separate what they call essence and energies. Now, what does that mean? The notion is that the essence of God, or that what God is, what makes God God, is completely inaccessible, completely beyond. When I talk about the infinite of God, the divine essence is really that the most impossible to, you can't describe the essence of the divine, because it's the origin of being. And so you cannot describe the origin of being within being. It is beyond all things. Now, the notion of God's energies is that underlying all manifestation, underlying all the things that we encounter, there is the wills the energies, the word energy is ruined. I'm sorry. The word energy, when we say energy, what we mean is that the wills, the small wills of God are under, let's say, they are under are under manifestations, under things, hiding under them. There is this spark of the divine. Okay. And another way to understand it is really, I tend to understand it more in terms of St. Maximus the Confessor. That is, that it is the logos. It is the logos of the thing. That is, it is the purpose. It is the thing that unites it together. So what makes something something? What its essence? What brings it? What makes it appear to us as being one? Okay. Now that is also in a certain manner, it is beyond rational description, and it is a spark of the divine. And the human person can, by contemplating the world, by contemplating God in prayer, in asceticism, in learning to love your neighbor, and in living in the life of love, can have access to those essences, to these kind of intuitions. You have these like intuitions of what the world is. And as you ascend, let's say, the mystical ladder, those intuitions start to join together more and more until we kind of enter into the life of Christ. That is, we can participate in the very manner in which the world exists in a way that is beyond what you can say about it. And that is actually this participation in God, the participation in the life of God, not in God's essence, we say, but in his energies. And so but it is a true participation in God. It is a true theosis, a true deification of the person. So for more of this, really, I would say you have to read the mystical fathers. Read The Way of the Pilgrim, for example, which is a small Russian book which talks about mysticism and hesychasm and what's called the prayer of the heart. And in that book, it talks about the manner in which the person attains to God in a pretty simple way. It's not too dense. It's a short book, and it's quite well done. So I would say to look into that. All right. All right. Jacob Russell wrote, I think he wants to be the Pope. Now, I don't understand what that means, Jacob. Pretty sure you're in the chat. What do you mean? What do you mean by I think he wants to be the Pope? You have to tell me that in the chat right now. Yes, it's called The Way of the Pilgrim, and it's a Russian book, David. All right. So Jacob also asks, ravens seem to be all over the place in mythologies. Why can't we agree on them? Some cultures see them as an evil omen, some as wise. There are some Native American cultures that have them a part of the creation story, bringing life. I've been very much obsessed with them for years, but I can't get a handle on the significance. Perhaps this has something to do with the merging of cultures, i.e. British coming to America and the natives of the land. Oh, okay. I get it. I see Jacob's answer. All right. So ravens. Now, ravens definitely have different meanings in different cultures, and that's maybe a way to talk about something very important, is that we have to be careful about symbolism. Symbolism is not a simple system of meaning. It's not like this means that, this means that, this means that. But symbolism, although we're surprised sometimes to find that there are some pretty universal symbols, universal images, which kind of mean the same in all cultures, but there are sometimes variations, and that's because that symbolism happens as a network, in a network of relationships. And so, for example, let's say a raven, like I don't know what it is in Native American culture, but a raven has a multiplicity of things which makes it a raven, which makes us able to see that it's a raven. It's black, it's a bird, it's it eats flesh, it's It has different aspects to it. And so the question is, what aspects are being pulled together to symbolize something in a story, or in a a certain, let's say, pattern of symbols. And so that's really important, because a lot of people, they get these, like, those of you that have seen my reading list, you'll notice that I have no dictionary of symbols in my reading list, because I think those dictionaries of symbols often do us a disfavor. They don't help us sometimes. They can be a little helpful, but I don't tend to look at them, because things don't have meaning in themselves. This is the whole process of the logos that I've talked about before, that meaning comes when things are brought together. The communion is how meaning happens. And so the communion of characteristics, the communion of images in a story, this is how meaning happens. And so that's how symbolism functions. So in the Bible, the raven definitely has to do with, or in Christianity in general, I would say the raven definitely has to do with this lost potential, or like this lost, this image of, is it an image of death, an image of a mismatch between heaven and earth, in a sense. So you get this image of in Noah, who sends out the raven, and the purpose of the bird is to find dry land, right? The bird needs to land, find the ground. So the spirit has to come down and touch the earth, so that the new world can begin. You have to have that connection. So Noah sends out these birds. So it's finally the dove which succeeds. Obviously, it's a white bird. It makes sense. It's light that comes down and hits the earth and finds life, finds this branch. But the raven is sent out, and there are these weird traditions and this imagery. If you look it up, if you look like medieval image of Noah's Ark online, you will find that there are images of the raven which came down and feasted on the dead bodies that are floating in the water. And so that's why the raven didn't come back. And so there really is this idea of like this possibility which is sent out and doesn't connect with earth in a proper manner. But there's almost this idea, I don't totally understand it. Maybe Metzir would have better insight into this. But there's this idea in a certain manner of the in the Bible, this idea of the scapegoat, or the sin offering, where people would put their sins on this beast, and then the beast would leave the camp and would just kind of go wander off into the desert. And so there's this idea about this raven which isn't able to find the ground, but somehow is part of the process, that it has the last remnants of this dead world. It has to kind of expiate them and go out and feed on these dead bodies. So hopefully that answers something a little bit about the raven. All right. All right. So Loris Fulmer says you should do a Q&A with your brother so we can ask him questions about his book. Also, brotherly chemistry is fun to watch. I totally agree. Mathieu, for some strange reason, he is totally disconnected. He doesn't have the internet. I don't totally understand why. He sent me an email, is it like a week ago, he just said, I do not have the internet. That's all he sent me as a message. So I haven't heard from Mathieu in months. I really am looking forward to making another video with him. I hope he'll agree. It would be interesting to have him on this Q&A as well. I will definitely take that into consideration and ask him about that. All right, my question is regarding, this is also Floris Fulmer. My question is regarding Christ's hair on icons. His hair looks like it is a lot of hair and look like a big wig, sort of pasted on or whatever. I get the feeling icons of saints and prophets tend to have more natural looking hair, including their facial hair. Jesus usually has a very thin mustache. Is there any significance behind how head and facial hair is depicted in icons? more specifically as it relates to Jesus. Okay, so Flores, this is important. What I'm going to say here is that when you're interpreting something, one of the problems is that we come in with glasses, with whatever glasses we have. We come in with whatever kind of schemes of interpretation that we have. And the first thing we have to do when we interpret something is we have to look within the thing itself, stay as close as possible. So when you're interpreting a movie, even, you have to first of all stay within the movie as much as you can, so that you can see how this image relates to this image, this sentence relates to this sentence, this is saying something, this is answering it, and so that you can see within that structure as closely as possible what it is that's happening. Once you've done that as much as possible, then you've kind of seen the pattern. And once you've seen the pattern, then you can relate it or make analogies to other structures and other patterns to help people understand what you've seen in the story. So now with icons, you really do, because the thing is that icons are not represented in a totally realistic way, nor are nor are cartoons, nor are comic books, or all kinds of imagery, or logos, or all kinds of ways of representing reality are not the same as let's say photorealism, or like just the way we see the world in everyday life. Although even that is the way we see the world in everyday life is not totally, let's say, is also framed by a lot of cultural aspects, or a lot of ways of thinking that make us see certain things and don't. For example, as an artist, I see way more color than most people. I'm just capable of seeing more color. I can see difference of gradations between colors that someone, for example, in some traditional countries, like in Africa, I remember in traditional Africa, there were just 3 colors. There was white, black, and red. And they would just fit every other variation within those 3 colors. And we think that that's weird, but it's like, do you know how many variations of blue there are? There's an indefinite amount of blues, and all of them either go towards yellow, or go towards green, or go towards purple, or go towards brown, or go towards black, or go towards white. And so it's like the fact that we even have a category called blue is not that easy. So I don't want to get too off my subject here, but so when you look at an icon, so for example, you look at the icon and you think, oh, his hair looks kind of like it's a wig. It's like, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's how you perceive it, or you think like Christ has a very thin mustache. It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I would say when you're trying to interpret an icon, you have to look at what the icon is talking about. You have to look at scripture. You have to look at other icons. You have to look at the manner, what is the icon actually trying to communicate with us? And then the tropes of the icon, I think, should then try to fit within that structure. Now, I think that the icon of Christ, for example, especially the Orthodox icon of Christ, I think there's something to say about how the Christ hair is not, let's say, not totally round, but there's something very round about the hair, and I think that is something that probably just slowly kind of took shape to kind of create this regular frame around his face, which would make sense. And also, for example, a trope in the icon of Christ about his hair is that usually his hair will tend to move on to one side, and so will tend to be on one of his shoulders. And so there's probably something in that as well, but it's hard to fully say this is what it means. It's more looking at the pattern and seeing how the fact that, for example, Christ sometimes has 2 different eyes, and so the fact that his hair would also then be pulled to one side, the fact that Christ does one thing with his right hand, blesses with his right hand, usually holds a book in his left hand. All of that can help you to see, for example, that maybe there's something about this left-right divide in the icon that's going on, and maybe the hair is participating in this left-right divide. But we have to be careful not to overinterpret, I think. All right. Have you read The Brothers Karamazov? If so, what are your thoughts on it? I really did. Yes, I did read The Brothers Karamazov. I loved The Brothers. This was Aaron Lechtenberger. I read The Brothers Karamazov. I loved it very much. I have to admit that last part with the orphan boy, and it just was too much. Like, I felt like it didn't have to be so long. But I think that the dynamics between the brothers and the father were very very powerful, and they really gave you a glimpse of some very deep patterns of the human being. And so, yes, I enjoyed it. I really like Dostoevsky quite a bit. I read many of his novels, and I like the Russian. I like Tolstoy as well. I like their work. All right. All right, David Flores asks about the symbolism of Ponyo. I did see Ponyo, but I don't remember it well enough to talk about the Ponyo and her mother. I think that Ponyo herself is a very fascinating figure in the story, because she's this shapeshifter, and she tends to change depending on what's happening in the context. So she does have something of this potentiality, like the idea of chaos or potential, which could go one way or the other depending on what happens. And so I thought that in the story was very beautifully shown. All right. Anjo, sorry if I mispronounce your name. Anjo Terpstra asked, do you have a structure in organizing your idea on symbolism? Or maybe any tips? Yes, I think that I use, well, there's a few things. One is what I said before. I think that, for example, when I'm interpreting something, I try always to first stay as close as possible to the thing I'm interpreting, as long as possible, to see a pattern. You have to see the pattern within the story, and usually the story or the image will tell you what's going on if you just look at it in terms of what are the patterns that are being set up in the story itself. That is definitely a way to organize your ideas. Another one is to learn the basic categories. Reading Mathieu's book is definitely helpful in that. So heaven and earth, the basic idea of two opposites and a synthesis. If you always try to look at that, of the world in that type of structure, that there's like two opposites and something which connects them together, that is definitely a good way to see it. So yeah, and also in terms of cycles. So this idea of breathing out, breathing in, this cycle. So you have something solid in the middle, then you have a cycle like a tree that goes around it, and that cycle or that swerving manifests the two opposites, and then in the middle is where they come together. So you have these cycles that go. That to me is like, that's the basic structure. That's the basic structure of the world. You can see that tree as a mountain, and you can see it as a tree. You can see it as as any kind of vertical identity, and then this cycle that moves in and out, breathing, heartbeat, all that stuff. Those are the basic categories. But I think that Mathieu's structure in terms of heaven and earth, time and space, people have been asking this question about time and space. Hopefully we can do a video with Mathieu on it, but the idea of heaven as identity is, mind, all the spiritual qualities, and earth as particular potentiality, and then the joining together as being the center of these two opposites, and then space as being how the meeting of heaven and earth lays itself out in terms of a coherent organization of potentiality, like a city or a person, a body, all kinds of things that are organized by a principle. And then time, which is when those two things stop to connect, and so death, questions, exceptions, anomalies, all these things which come and question the identity and kind of force the identity either to expand itself or to die and then for something else to be reborn. And so I think that for those who have been wondering about the relationship between heaven and earth and time and space, that's the easiest way I can explain it. All right. Which came first, the meaning or the matter? And the question is, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Seems like those are simultaneous. Well, they name heaven first, but I would say that they're simultaneous. All right. So this was, who asked that question? This was Benjamin Wood. All right. So Michael Parsons asked, my question is about criticism. Oh, this is a long question. Let's see. All right, so Michael Parsons asked, my question is about criticism of our homes and the ideals of our home. I've been thinking about what you've said about serving the Most High and angels, demons, principalities. Can't help but wonder if we as citizens of a given country aren't properly hosting or serving the angels of, let's say, the West or our country in general. I believe critical thinking and criticism are important, but in the U.S., it seems that many people I hear are criticizing the U.S. from a place of negativity and deconstruction, and hence serving a demon rather than from a place of construction and gratitude, and hence hosting the angel. My first question is, I'm using this language properly, or at least am I close? So now, okay, so this is a difficult question because okay, on the one hand, I think that it is right to honor that which unites us, right? So I think that a certain loyalty to your family, a loyalty to your community, to your city, to your country, to your group of people, whatever it is, your culture. I think that a certain amount of loyalty is good. It's necessary, and it's important. And I think that we need to definitely see that, like you talked about, this idea of honoring, our angels or the principles which unite us. But I think we also have to be careful not to see that as the highest good. And so, the lot of the nationalism which appeared in the 20th century can become problematic to the extent that it puts the highest point of unity at the national level. And so I think that we also have to be very cautious of that, because it is possible for order to become corrupt, and for our leaders to be corrupt, for the structure in which we live to be corrupt. And so, but like you said, I think that we should always be able to criticize that corruption, criticize those problems in a spirit of love and in a spirit of rectification, rather than in a spirit of revolution and of destruction. Now, when you see someone who is an American but absolutely hates America, that person is definitely going to be miserable. Is going to be miserable their whole life, because they're not working the fact that they see problems in their country or in whatever it is that unites, or in their family, for example. You see the same thing. It's like there are problems in your family. See them, acknowledge them, and then work to bring your family together. But the rebellious teenager who sees that his parents are hypocritical, or that his parents aren't perfect, and then becomes a total jerk and starts to go away from the family and to break things apart and to not participate in the community, which is the family. That is not the right way to go about it. And so I think that's very important. Now, as to hosting angels, you have to always remember that the angel can often also appear as the stranger. And so, the idea that the stranger can hide some secret seed that will help you to grow is also a part of this notion of hosting angels. And so I think that we need to be open to that as well. And obviously not like I said before, not be naive neither, and not, because there are plenty of stories in the Bible where strangers can be subversive, and there are other stories where strangers bring you bring you a solution to your problem, or bring you or do manifest angels. So the idea is to just be attentive and be aware, and see, when one is one and it's the other. There's no easy answer to that. All right, I need to speed things up a little bit. We started a bit late, but I can't go on because I'm not in my house, so I don't want to go on forever, because people are waiting for their bedroom to go to bed. All right, okay. So Drew McMahon asks, how important is proselytizing in the Orthodox faith? It at least appears to not have the same emphasis as it does in the West. And I agree. I think proselytizing is a very low priority in Orthodoxy, in the sense that Orthodoxy presents itself as it is. It doesn't try to sugarcoat itself. It doesn't try to make itself look easier or more, hip, more, with the times, or whatever way that some churches want to show themselves. Rather, it presents itself as it is, and for those who are willing to take, to pick up their cross, to get on that ladder and to start ascending, then they'll open the doors for you. But you might have to knock a few times before they open the door. They're not going to be waiting for you at the church door with a cup of coffee and a cushy seat. Like, that's not happening. They will definitely make it a little bit, most of them will make it a little bit difficult for you to become Orthodox. And that has to do with, the idea of this being a life, this being a real path, this being a path of spiritual ascetic reality, not just the ticket to heaven thing. All right. So Adam Shillard asked, do you have anything to say on the topic of fools for Christ, like Saint Pelagia or Diveyevo? Yes, I think fools for Christ are extremely important. I think that the fool for Christ shows us the limit of our system, shows us the limit of our hierarchy. For those, in a talk that I gave called Pentecost for the Zombie Apocalypse, I talk about how we have to be careful when we understand hierarchy. We have to understand its limits, and understand that the hierarchy is for us, right? It is for humans, but that there's always room for surprise. And the fool for Christ appears as this exception, really, as this exception, as something which doesn't fit, as this strangeness, as this stranger, as this weirdness, but in a manner which gives life to people, and also in a manner which awakens some spiritual qualities in other people. And so it's tricky, though, because it's like, I always wonder, because I never met a fool for Christ, but I always ask myself, like, how do I tell the difference between just a crazy person and a fool for Christ? And I don't have a total answer for that. I don't have an easy answer, except maybe studying some of the stories. Often in the stories, there'll be some secret moment where people perceive in that person's life that, in fact, they are hiding, all their holiness in this kind of outward kind of outlandish behavior, which attempts to show the limits of the system. Now, one of the things that can help you maybe understand the difference between a fool for Christ and let's say a dangerous fool, or a dangerous exception, is that the fool for Christ will never have a revolutionary discourse, whereas some fools for Christ, in parentheses, will use their folly or use their exceptionalism to question the authority of the church, or to question the normal hierarchy. Whereas the fool for Christ like an image. Saint Francis of Assisi is a perfect image where Saint Francis, went around naked, did all kinds of insane looking. He would, was a story about the Franciscans. They would spin on themselves and then stop and then just walk in that direction, until God showed them something that they needed to do. So it's like that kind of weird behavior. But they always did it in a manner which did not. St. Francis never tried to take authority over the people there. He never tried to take spiritual authority over others. And so maybe that is a cue to distinguishing a holy fool or a fool for Christ, compared to the more subversive kind. All right, let's see how many questions are left here. All right, I got a few questions left. Let's see if I can get through them. All right. So Brian Highlands asks, this may be a slight departure from your normal symbolism and culture topics, but here goes. Can you explain your interpretation of Matthew 16:18 verse? Quote, and I say, also unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. After reading your articles on Orthodox Arts Journal, particularly the one titled St. Peter on the right, St. Paul on the left, you mentioned how the right, St. Peter, is associated with authority, establishment, and gathering in. If this is true about St. Peter, then shouldn't he be considered to have the primacy of authority, as the Catholic argument would state, and therefore papal authority over the entire church body is a valid doctrine? What would be the pitfalls of this Catholic perspective? If you have any reading suggestions to understand the Orthodox perspective on this passage, then please let us know. All right, I'm going to give you my perspective on that thing. The Orthodox perspective is easy to find online. You can just look up, the Great Schism, or why Orthodox aren't submitted to the Pope. My perception is this, and this is going to be maybe controversial. I wanted to make a video about this at some point, so maybe I will. Who knows? For those who've watched all my videos or read quite a bit of my articles, I talk about the right hand and I talk about the left hand, and I talk about the fact that these are neither good nor bad, that the right hand has a positive and a negative aspect. The left hand has a positive and a negative aspect. Now, in the right hand, St. Peter manifests all the positive aspects of the right hand, which was asked, this idea of being the shepherd, of gathering in the sheep, being the apostle to the Jews, being the foundation on which the church is built. All these things are true of Peter, but the other pitfall of Peter is also true. The pitfall of the right hand is the sin of pride and the sin of self-sufficiency. And so St. Peter is both the one who said, who said, like, I will go out on the water. I'm the first one who wanted to go out on the water and to walk on the water with Christ. And then he's the one who sinks to the ground. St. Peter is the one who declared, the first one to declare that Christ was the Son of God, that Christ was the Messiah. And then if you look at that text, the chapter right after, St. Peter says to Christ that Christ shouldn't die, won't die. And then Christ tells St. Peter, get behind me, Satan. Okay. And so this is everywhere in St. Peter's story. So St. Peter says that he will go to death for Christ, that he's willing to die with him. The only one who says that. And then he takes a sword, right? He's got the sword. He's ready to fight for Christ. And then he denies Christ. And so I think that in St. Peter and in his church, I think are all the positive aspects of St. Peter and also the negative aspects of St. Peter. And I think that the reason why there is a schism in the church from the Orthodox perspective is all the negative aspects of St. Peter, which is the belief of self-sufficiency, the belief that the church stops at St. Peter, that St. Peter has an absolute authority over all the other disciples, that he's something of a king over the other disciples. And so I think that is That is, so I can I can believe very deeply that St. Peter is both the rock on which Christ built his church and also the one who denied him at the same time. And to be honest, that doesn't cause a problem for me. Now, how it's going to play itself out in the whole story, how it's going to resolve itself, I can only hope for the better. I can only hope that I can only hope that Peter will find his place and that the others will also be able to recognize St. Peter, but that has to happen for real. It can't be fake. It can't be a game. It can't be pretend. It has to be a real return to communion, and that's not my job. We'll let those in authority be responsible for that and also be accountable for that on the last judgment. All right. Okay. All right. So Joachim England asks, please unpack the story of Jacob wrestling with God. Oh, man, I will not answer that question. That is a tough question. But I promise you, Joachim, I will think about it very deeply. And maybe I'll either answer at the next Q&A or I will maybe make a video about that because that's a tough question. All right. Tanner Mathis, why are angels depicted in icons but God the Father isn't? I'm reading St. Athanasius on the Incarnation, and it says, but how could this have occurred except by the coming of the very image of God, our Savior Jesus Christ? For neither by human beings was it possible, since they were created in the image, but neither by angels, for they were not even images. So he says, I know Christ is depicted because he became man and has a physical form that is shown in icons, but the Father and the Holy Spirit aren't depicted because they don't have physical forms. Seems like early Christians, or at least Athanasius, believe that angels don't have physical bodies, forms either. So why would they appear in icons? So first of all, they appear in icons because angels, despite the fact that they don't have physical bodies, they seem to be able to manifest themselves in the human world and manifest themselves in human appearance or human bodies. And so we see the angels in the Old Testament are definitely interacting with Adam. And so that is one reason. The second reason is also because we use symbolic tropes to represent angels, and we know that we do. So angels don't have wings, obviously, or at least, it's like the fact that we show angels with wings is a reference to some text in the Old Testament, but it's mostly to help you understand that, showing angels with wings is like showing birds. It's this idea that they're spiritual beings, that they're heavenly beings. And so the representation of angels is symbolic. We're not representing them in a personal manner the same way that we're representing Christ. So I hope that answers. All right. So Brylan maybe asked, have you ever played a game in the Legend of Zelda franchise? And the answer is no, I have not. So that's the easy way to answer that question. I'm not a big gamer. I have played some video games in my life, but it's not a huge part of my either my growing up or just even my adult life. It's not a huge part of that. All right. So we managed to get 21 people in here, despite the fact that I ended up giving you a different link. All right, let's see if there's some questions quickly in here. Adam Shillard says you need some merch, and yeah, I think I'm gonna try to do something. I'd like to have some things that people can associate with, that they can wear, they can have images they can associate with. I tried to convince Mathieu to have that image on his book of the snake and the tree, but also I have some ideas about maybe the logo for the symbolic world or some symbolic images that we could have on different objects to kind of for people to be able to have as mementos and to identify with. So that might happen. All right. I have a strange question. I'm a huge fan of both you and Sticks and Hammer 666, and I am torn. Is it possible to be a Christian occultist, or would that simply be another way of saying mystic? So I would say this. I would say easy answer is no. I don't think you can be a Christian and occultist. I think you have to be a Christian because to be a Christian also means you have to be in communion with a church. Now, I do think this, and this might be controversial, is that I do believe that one of the reasons why occultism appeared in the 19th century was because, maybe even before, maybe 18th, 19th century, or even starting during the Enlightenment, I would say, with kind of the Rose Cross and these types of secret organizations. I think that the reasons why these things started to appear was because Christianity had lost the capacity to offer deeper, insightful meaning into their own tradition. And so, although I disagree with the occultists, especially to the extent that they break from the church, I do understand the frustration that some of the occultists can have facing the kind of dumb, kind of just literal in the fundamental type of misunderstood Christianity. And so I would say that if you are attracted to occult writers, I would say to read some of the more modern mystical writers of the church in the Orthodox Church. Like, I think that someone who has read some occult writers could read Vladimir Lossky, for example, and find quite a bit to feed them and help them see Christianity in a different light. The problem with the occult is that first of all, it tends to, not always, but it often can tend to be focused on practical things, like changing practical things like magic, that kind of stuff. But then it also, you tend to be somewhat isolated. You're not in communion with others. And so there's also a kind of aesthetic of will and this aesthetic of power. Whereas in Christianity, we really do have the idea that the highest virtue is love, which is the possibility of all things coming together. And so it's not just about using language and the power of language and of psyche to alter, reality in certain manners, but rather to come together and to participate together in this life of the infinite. And so I don't want to totally denigrate what some of the more intelligent occultists wanted to accomplish, but I think that you really have to be careful. You have to be really careful with that stuff, because you often in the occult, people are playing with things that I don't think they totally understand, and I think that also they're kind of playing with demons, very consciously. It's like playing with demons. You when you invoke a demon, you think that you will control it. You think that you can control it and use its power to change something, but there's a rather larger chance that it's going to dominate you. And so I definitely think that the fullness of Christianity and the sacraments is the highest way to go. Even in Orthodox, often in Muslim countries, for example, in Turkey, when they need to exorcise someone, they bring them to an Orthodox priest. So that tells you something about which one has more power. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. Can you talk more about how to think about ornament in art and architecture? And does Orthodoxy have anything to say about proportion and geometry? I'm going to not answer that now, but I am staying right now. I am in the house. Well, it's not their house, but it's where they're staying for now because they're renovating their house. But I'm in the house of Andrew Gould, who is one of the foremost Orthodox architects right now, and one of the smartest people I know. And so I am going to do, in the next few weeks, I'm going to actually interview him in person. The first interview that I'm doing with someone in person. And we're going to sit down, and I am going to talk about architecture and proportion and meaning and how it affects consciousness. And so I think that is going to be definitely interesting. So I'll keep you guys. I would love to answer some more of these questions, but I think I need to go because it's getting late. And so I would, all right, let's see. All right, no, I think we're good, guys. I appreciate everybody coming in. I'm sorry that we ended up I'm sorry that it ended up being a bit confusing. I hope everybody found their way. And I think this is then going to end up being public. I might make it just for patrons, just because I think I said a few weird things in this chat once again, things I might regret later. So all right, guys, thank you for your support. I've got some videos coming out very soon. Some of you might have seen I put out the Last Judgment video just for you guys on Patreon, and also I think on the Facebook group, so you can check that out if you haven't seen it. The link is in the Patreon, on the Patreon page, and I'll try to put up some videos once in a while in advance for you guys, because it's easy. It's easier for me, you know, and write your questions, because now the problem is that sometimes the videos, they get, you know, 10, 20,000 views, even more. We got 100,000 views for a video recently, and then there's just this flood of questions. But if you guys go onto the videos, if I'm able to put them in advance, put in your questions in advance, and then I'll be able to answer the sensible questions, and then ignore all the craziness that happens later. So all right, guys, I am going to say goodbye, and we'll see you all in next month. All right, bye-bye.